Hey, good morning, all. Today we have Renuka for our cybersecurity series. Welcome, Renuka. If you can please describe your current role and experience in this industry.
Absolutely. Glad to be here, Naveen. My name is Renuka Nadkarni. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Aryaka. I am focused on, as you can see on my background, unified SASE as a service. So we believe that the industry is going towards unification of networking and security, and adding all these security in the networking layer is what I call secure connectivity, which is something that Aryaka builds. Personally, I have been in cybersecurity space for about 25 years, and I have always built the latest and the greatest security technology. And as you know, there is never a dull moment in security industry. So back in the day when I started my career, I started with VPNs, firewalls, IPS. Then I was at a SWIG company. I was the first PM who built micro segmentation, which is virtual security at VMware. We were the one who actually uh, coined that term back in the day, and which is a very common term used today. I also launched DNS security portfolio. We had something called as a DNS firewall and DNS security for DDoS attacks and so on. And then I was at F5 where I built their security on the app security side of the world. Also acquired some cloud security companies, bot mitigation, all of those. And then I joined Aryaka to really jump on this convergence of networking and security to build what we call as SASE today. So that's been my
Perfect.
journey.
Thank you.
And clearly, AI is changing everything, as we know. So that's my next area of interest where I'm spending a lot of my time on.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Renuka. So, as you said, right? So AI is like exploding. So, what do you think about the explosion or the traction that AI is getting nowadays? Do you think it's worth, or it's just like something which will come, like maybe blockchain type thing, which will come and then will fade away with the time? So, what are your thoughts into that?
I think anything that is helping businesses grow or enablers, and there's a direct correlation. Like we saw this happen when there was cloud adoption, like back in the day. In fact, I distinctly remember when I was at VMware, public clouds were not like that big a thing, and there was actually a project which VMware had to build a public cloud, and they talked to the customers and customers said, oh, not really, we don't really know if you're going to use it. So they diverted the direction of that project pretty much 75% into the development to make it what we call as private cloud at that time. So it is a very classic example of innovators dilemma, and not go into that direction. But as you saw, because there was tremendous business value and business benefit, clearly public cloud took off. Clearly SaaS took off. There were a lot of concerns about people not using SaaS and security concerns and so on. So I feel AI is in fact extremely high potential because of the amount of efficiency it introduces in every single thing we do. And it's just insane how many areas of our lives it has touched. I was just looking at my Google Photos yesterday, and automatically Gemini showed up. And Gemini search was so much better than the native search, right? So it's touched every single aspect of our life, and it's insane how fast we are all getting very comfortable with it.
Totally. And as you come from a very strong background on security, so what are your thoughts when this, as you said, it's Gen AI coming into picture, is bringing like a lot of easiness, lot of productivity, lot of things getting much more better exponentially. So, but as a security person, right, we always look at anything, any adoption coming with some more strongly and saying, okay, is this getting any security threats or what it is and all. So, what are your thoughts into that? What is the most significant security threats that you are thinking are coming up with Gen AI adoption?
Yeah, so actually, Gen AI adoption is changing the entire paradigm. It's changing the consumption model, how users and how a common person uses it. So it's changing the consumption model, the way I want things instantaneously, the way I need answers. I'm gonna trust them. I'm gonna take them at the face value. So all of that is absolutely like a massive shift. On the other side, the business's operating model are changing very, very fast. Okay. And there is such a huge business benefit and business value that nobody has the heart to get in the way and say, oh, let's consider the compliance issues or let's consider the security issues. But nevertheless, these are extremely important, as we know, because if we don't take care of them, in the, from the get go, it'll be very difficult to protect against all the malicious intent. So when the early adoption happens, everyone has good intentions, and we believe that everyone has good intentions, but that's not true. There are a lot of people who have very malicious intent, and there is a whole industry, as you know, of threat actors who also are running businesses by, in fact, attacking and creating, all kinds of fraud on these. So there has to be a balance in terms of, while we adopt it, we also need to protect ourselves. While we are growing and we are trying to grow very fast in this space, we are also have to be conscious in terms of any kind of downsides and the risks that are out there. So you're absolutely right. As a security professional, we always have to strike that balance, and we don't want security to get in the way of the business. We really want it to be the business enabler. So I think of AI security as more of a business enabler versus something that gets in the way of AI adoption.
Got it. So, as you said, right, and with internet coming into picture, security has been going as par with it, right? So, internet comes, it exposes a lot of websites and blah blah. Security just keeps moving. It has been like there for last whenever as soon as the internet came. So, and there have been a lot of security solutions. Lot of I was just really looking. There are a lot of 100 billion plus worth of companies which are like Zscaler or Palo Alto, and all those are like CrowdStrike, like all there, like Palo Alto and CrowdStrike has already crossed 100 billion valuation, right? So do you think, and they all come up with like Aryaka, right? So they all come up with some of the existing security solutions. So do you think the existing security solution that these companies have built up with lot of years, like 20 years or so, are they enough for the current threats that the Gen AI adoption is bringing to the table?
Absolutely not. And this is one of the things with security, right? See, whenever there are new attack surfaces, there have to be new security threat solutions. Like it's pretty much something which is, like I mentioned, even in my career, I remember like evolving with, there was no virtualization. So you did virtualization. You have to figure out what are the security concerns around that. You did public cloud. You have to figure out what are the security concerns around public cloud. We did SaaS. Then CASB came, right? So every time there is a new technology and new potential threat surfaces and new ways of doing fraud. So I think there are two slightly different angles to this conversation. When we say threat attack surfaces, you are talking about like application security, with applications need to be secured. When we talk about fraud, you're talking about a human who's intentionally doing things like botnet as an example, or there is a lot of, if you look at the OAP's top 10 automated attacks, these are all like threat actors manipulating the processes or the operational aspect in the security. So there are two different things. One is the assets that you attack, and the other one is the operational aspects of, how you do, like Nike's promotion for shoes. And then there's a sneaker bot. Sneaker bot comes and takes all the promotion shoes, so the actual users never get access to it, right? So
Yeah.
in security world, it's very interesting that attack surfaces range across many different dimensions. It's not just the assets, you have to go through that. And one of my pet peeves is when people use the word security, they use it like very broadly and generously. And I'm like, what do you mean by security? Because there are so many aspects and dimensions. So I created a taxonomy for our own like sake of internal conversations. And I break down AI security into three large buckets. Now, these are super large buckets. They have many, dimensions to it internally. But at a very high level, I feel there are three big dimensions when we think of AI security. The first one is, which is the most talked about, is the security and threats on the AI models themselves. Now, this is super exciting for everybody because AI models themselves are new. So this is a brand new attack surface. Everybody's super excited. They're like, hey, what can I do? And how can I, manipulate the models and so on and so forth. So I think that's where we have most focus. Then the second area is something that actually trains the AI models, which is the data itself. And transferring large amounts of data for training and all has a ton of areas where there are multiple things that can go wrong. So today, when I talk to our customers say that, they have been using FedEx to transfer data on the hard disk. Okay, so I heard this first time, and I was like, "This is some kind of a anomaly, or it sounds funny." And then I talked to our partner Equinix, and they said they actually maintain an Excel sheet of this pricing of FedEx for shipping. So now just think about for a second, your data is on a hard disk, and they said, "Oh, it's encrypted and all that," but just the process of like this data being moved and getting lost, and who knows, right? Just the logistical aspects of it are so insanely complicated. And then even when you store it, you have to think about data poisoning. You have to think about how a threat actor can manipulate the model, the information based on this, right? So this data in itself is a very big deal. Then of course you have the compliance, privacy, and all, which is all related to data, right? The third angle, which I feel is the most ignored in this AI conversation today, is AI infrastructure, right? There is an equivalent of DDoS attacks. There is an equivalent of, we talked about, yeah, look at DeepSeek, right? When DeepSeek happened, the first in the first few hours, people were able to access their user information, username, and API tokens, which were stored somewhere in their own system. But this is a basic application security hygiene. Like, how do you, retain all of these? And these were like the users of the DeepSeek, not the external like customer users. Like this was the internal development thing, right? So I feel like these kinds of things are I categorize them as infrastructure attacks, for lack of better word, because infrastructure includes things like your network services, your storage, your compute where it's running, who has access control, all of those identity authentication, all of those authorization, all of those to me falls under that bucket, right? So when I think of AI security, I break it into like these three things, which is AI model based attacks, data based attacks, and then infrastructure attacks. And like I said, today there is so much fixation on only the AI models that people have forgotten that uh, the AI actually uses different protocols. So to answer your question, coming back to your question, what happens to the current security technology and are they sufficient? And the answer is absolutely not, because today's technologies, the way we have built in our the way we build things, and I'll use simple examples to keep it more generic. We do protocol parsing, so we know how HTTP works. We extract the payloads, then you match it with your DLP, then you do whatever like you do, but you know how it works. With AI there are brand new protocols, and these protocols were also not like like simple. They are more complicated, where there is an ecosystem, many people are talking to many people, there is RAG models who need to be updated. So it's not as simple as a point to point protocol that we are normally used to, which is client server or user application. That's not true anymore, right? So the models that were built, or the security technology that was built earlier, does not work. One of my favorite examples is data leakage prevention. We have very nice data leakage prevention solutions that look for, say, a 16-digit credit card number, and they do great work, pattern matching, this, that, right? But in an AI where there's a natural language processing, I will say my credit card has, four parts to it. Each part has four numbers. My last four digits are ONE1, TWO2, or something on those lines. None of your DLP systems are going to be able to catch that, right? It's such a simple example, right? Yeah, so I feel like there's a lot of things that need to be very quickly um, added to our already existing security portfolio because of AI.
Got it. So very, very, very good points, Renuka. So as you said, right, about the two things, right? One is like the protocols, new protocols coming into picture with the AI adoption, and how we are, because it's a new thing. So there will be taking our security researchers and security companies will also be taking time to go through and then dig deeper and to come up with a solution which is like more sophisticated for these AI threats coming into picture. And the second is like the new way of how the DLP was treated, right? DLP is not like just a 16-digit number for any credit card number or like a 10-digit number for a social security number, but it is like now how do you point it. So if you can put in a chat GPT or any other tool, and you can deep seek even, so say that, okay, create this in a way where the end user understands, but it can false, or it can just pass the current DLP solutions. It can develop the same text what you were talking, right? 16-digit number, last four digits, ONE, whatever, like XYZ. So pretty good thought. So what's because all these new threats coming, what strategies do you recommend for the organizations to stay ahead of these threats? Like, what should they do right now? I understand there are security companies working on those fronts to develop, but it will take time, right? It will take time to analyze those protocols. It will take time to come up with those context base, or how to summarize that particular text into some numbers, and then put that numbers to our classification engine and come up with a DLP and all those things. But right now, what do you think, what strategies you would recommend to fight with those AI attacks that are coming?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. In fact, I was talking to one of our customers, and we had exact same conversation in terms of like what we should do there. And I feel like, just like we did with application security, right? We talked about DevSecOps, and we said, what does it mean? Like, when you do application development, you have to take into account certain things. So if you use the parallelism of the DevSecOps to MLSecOps, right? The difference between DevSecOps and MLSecOps is AI adoption is adopting models, and it's like you're adopting logic and models. You're not building applications. So there's a slight difference. You're not generating code. You're actually generating models, right? So I think, but there is a tremendous parallelism in that conversation, and which is why I broke it into the taxonomy I did, because each of those areas are in an organization owned by different people, and because different people own that area, they should actually be the one who worry about the security of that aspect of it. So you won't find somebody who worries about AI security in an organization, right? Like that would be CISO probably. But if you really have to execute and implement on the mechanics of specific parts of it, right? If you think about it, like, where are my AI models coming from? What is their lineage? Are they validated or not? How do I, and this is where in fact blockchain can be a super solution. You just mentioned it at the beginning of our call, because then I can track the lineage. Then I know, how much have they evolved, and who's evolving, and where is it coming from, right? So I think that's the starting point of the conversation. And um, in an organization, if you have those roles and responsibilities for MLSecOps broken between different different teams in the organization, and they have proper handoffs, then life gets very easy, right? Because then you can track model-based attack by, enforcing things like lineage checking, making sure that when you go to all these, open source AI, you have some rules and regulations about what can and cannot be taken, right? So this is like very basic, just like we saw in the application explosion. This is the AI explosion, very, very similar path. Then you have people who are actually guardians of the data. They need to actually be responsible for sanitizing it, protecting it. And it's not like the security, solutions that we have today are of not any use. They are actually meaningful. They just need to be deployed in the right way, right? So minimally, whatever data do we do, sanitization, anonymization, all of these things need to be owned by the people who own the data in the organization, right? So if they take care of anonymization and making sure that, whatever they do for training and in the right way, life will be so much easier, because the
Got
intent of the training is also very important, right? You don't always need actual sensitive data. You don't always need actual SSN numbers. If you're trying to find models and trying to find trends of, whatever the business does, you can do a fantastic job by just anonymizing the sensitive data and using the data and sanitizing it, right? So that entire function of sanitizing the data, anonymizing it, all of it, access control of it, simple firewall rules, user identity based, simple application based conversation, simple network hygiene is super, super critical, right? So that's how you go through, and that's where the infrastructure team comes into picture, network security team comes into picture. Have they created the right rules for who accesses which kind of information, right? Which just like CASB, right? uh, People in sales need to access Salesforce, but people in other teams may not need all the access that Salesforce have access to everything in the Salesforce, right? So it's a very, very similar conversation, giving right access to right people, and then protecting the infrastructure itself from resource exhaustion attacks. This is like a variation of DDoS in our world, right? So the infrastructure team needs to know, okay, now that I have this asset, this is a potential risk. What am I going to do about it? And it may not be anything different than just adding a few other firewall rules or a few other monitoring things on top of it. It might be as simple as that.
Got it. So what you are saying is like the security starts from the edge itself, starts from the source itself, where the let's say somebody is putting data into those models. The if it would be much better if they can sanitize the data itself or anonymize the data itself. They don't need to put real social security number. If there can be a system sitting there, same at the network level, right? So those
Exactly.
type of things.
Yes,
Got it.
exactly. In fact, I mapped the life cycle of AI ML SecOps to the actual, what are the challenges and what are the ways to mitigate. So it might be helpful if I can just maybe just flash the one slide that I put
Sure,
it on
sure.
this. Um,
Totally, totally. Yeah, please.
okay, so this is something which which is a practical application of what somebody can do, right? If you think about this with the AI, planning what the intent of my AI is actually the most critical aspect. Like I really need to know why am I doing this? And typically what happens is in this particular planning process, there is there are many stakeholders, right? So this is where organizationally getting them involved ahead of time, like if there's any compliance regulations concerns, like those should be considered as part of the planning itself. Like before I give away data to somebody, I need to actually have my stakeholders agree on that, right? So doing risk analysis, attack surface analysis, security baselining is super super helpful even at the beginning before you start the AI project, right? Then you talk about data. We talked about like how the data security, collection, preparation, sanitization. Typically, things that can go wrong is breaches and unreliable sources and not enough protection from poisoning and so on. So if we make sure that privacy and integrity sanitization is done, it actually helps. And then as you go on, when you build the models, at what point do you move it from like staging to production, which is an equivalent of putting it in the, inference, training to inference in our AI world, right? And then validation of this, deploying them, making sure that they are deployed in the right way, there is no model hijacking, and so on and so forth, right? So this is the entire life cycle. I'm not going to go through each one of them in detail, but it suffices to say that this is what I feel enterprises need to adopt for secure AI adoption and, for accelerating the AI adoption.
Totally, totally. Thanks, Renuka. Thanks for sharing this. This is real helpful. So we talked about Gen AI. We talked about Gen AI security. What are the new? You had a taxonomy also, like three star things. So all good. So, but as a CISO or as a person who is in charge of a company, with security needs, what are the things that he needs to be prepared while waiting for the new solutions that the startups or the current security big companies are building up, so that they can safely or they can push to their organization so that there is no data leakage to AI solutions, or they safely enable the use of Gen AI adoption. So what should they do at current stage when the security solutions are still getting evolved, or and the paradigm is changing so much, right? From like going to agentic AI right now, deep six coming and all those things. So what do you think that right now the CISO should be pushing more, apart from putting everything on the edge? What are the on the security side, what they need to do? What you talked, they can, it's a hygiene, more hygiene they can take care. But apart from that, what are the current security things they can do as a company, as a team, and what the CISO should be pushing to the all the employees in the company?
I think starting with setting up best practices for the organization, I think is the number one thing. Part of this conversation is doing the inventory, trying to understand what exactly is the needs of the business, being in integral part of that conversation from the get go, because every day we have new stuff that is coming up, and people are actually subjected to a lot of dilemmas, right? Like you saw when DeepSeek came out, it was like, should I like go install it or should I be wary of it, right? And a lot of people had to make policies like instantaneously in terms of what is my company's policy on this, right? Because these are all these are very complicated dilemmas. They are not as straightforward. So I think the first and the foremost is to be very deeply plugged into like all these AI conversations that are happening. Have a peer support group to in fact share insights and share knowledge, and work with people to understand like how they are addressing some of these, because it's a collective learning. It is so new and it is growing so fast that we absolutely need to leverage each other's knowledge, and we absolutely need to do collective learning, right? So I think that today is like so much more important than ever it has ever been. And then being part of the business decision making, being inserting yourself into all the business conversations, making sure that you have an inventory of what is going on at the minimum, setting up very quickly best practices. We talked about how blockchain can help with lineage tracking, right? This is something that they can implement in house without waiting for security vendors to go build fancy solutions, right? And then just have that clarity in terms of what can be used and who can use it at the minimum. I mean, this in itself is actually a lot of work, but I would think that this is the minimum that any CISO today should be making sure that they have taken care of.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Renuka. So before we part our way, so one last question. So what advice would you give to security startups like us? So we are focusing on Gen AI security space and learning from you, who is an industry veteran in security space. So what advice would you give to security startups or like us, which are focusing more on the Gen AI security? So what should we focus, looking at your all the thought process that you have built up? So what do you think? What should be the focus area?
I think one thing I've learned over my career is you should always have very, very clear picture about what problem you're solving for. Because unfortunately for us, like I said, there's a lot of fixation on, some of the very advanced security problems and so on. The issue is who is going to want to solve that problem, and who is going to want to pay for it, because there are two very different conversations. I mean, I can appreciate and look at all these great problems and great solutions all day long, but when it comes to spending money, how critical is this problem for the business to be solved? And as I said at the beginning of our podcast, right, one of the things I genuinely feel is security should be the enabler for AI adoption. Because every time we come up with, and this is the story of like security industry from the very long time, the solutions are typically considered as getting in the way of business, right? So if you have security solutions that are actually enabling the business and improving the agility of AI adoption, or adding guardrails for safer adoption, I think that thinking and that design, when you design a product, or that design principle can actually be super, super helpful. So I feel, and there are genuinely a lot of different problems to be solved. It's really, you have to make a choice, and it's a good time to actually have to make that choice. Like you have so many options, and as long as the design principle is to be the enabler for AI, I think, and I see your tag actually, it says safely enable AI, which is impressive because I genuinely believe in that. I mean, that is something which is a big deal for customer adoption.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Renuka. Thanks for taking time to talk to us. Thank you. Really appreciate you spending time with us.
Great. Thank you, Naveen. Great to be here. And thanks for giving the opportunity to have this conversation.
Thank you.